The sensors screamed their warning across every military station orbiting Throne Prime. Something was coming. Something impossible. Admiral Vexthor stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship Eternal Glory, his 4 eyes fixed on the holographic display before him. For 12,000 years, the Galactic Empire had ruled the stars. For 12,000 years, their sensors had detected every ship, every vessel, every piece of debris that dared to approach their worlds. The technology was perfect. It had never failed until now. "Report," Vexthor commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets for 3 centuries. "Admiral, we have a spatial anomaly forming directly above the Imperial Palace," the sensor officer replied, her voice shaking. "No jump signature detected. No gravity wave displacement. No temporal distortion. It's just appearing." "Impossible," Vexthor said flatly. "Check your equipment." "Equipment verified, sir. All stations confirm the readings." The Admiral's scales rippled with irritation. In the viewing screen ahead, the capital world of Throne Prime gleamed like a jewel. Millions of ships filled the orbital space, gathered for the annual Grand Military Parade. Representatives from all 847 civilized systems had come to watch the Empire display its might. And now something was ruining his perfect ceremony. The space above the Imperial Palace began to shimmer. Reality itself seemed to fold and twist like fabric being pressed by invisible hands. Every weapon system in the fleet immediately locked onto the disturbance. Thousands of targeting computers hummed to life, ready to destroy whatever dared to interrupt the most sacred day in the Imperial calendar. Then it happened. The warship simply existed where nothing had been before. No flash of light. No burst of energy. One moment there was empty space, and the next moment there was a vessel unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. It was massive, easily 3 kilometers long, built with clean lines and sharp angles that seemed purposeful and aggressive. Its hull was a dark gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols marked its side, letters that no translator in the fleet could identify at first glance. But what truly terrified every military analyst watching was simple. Their targeting systems couldn't lock onto it. The ship was there, visible to the naked eye, but to every computer, every sensor, every weapon guidance system in the fleet, it simply didn't exist. "All batteries fire at will," Vexthor shouted. "Sir, we can't achieve weapon lock. The targeting computers won't acknowledge the vessel." "Then fire manually. Saturate that entire area with plasma fire." The weapons officer hesitated. "Admiral, the Imperial Palace is directly below that position. Any missed shots will—" "I gave you an order." Before anyone could act, every communication system in the fleet activated simultaneously. Every screen, every speaker, every holographic display lit up with the same image. A human woman appeared, wearing a dark blue uniform with golden insignia on her shoulders. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and her eyes were a striking green color. She looked directly at the camera with a calmness that felt more threatening than any weapon. "Attention, Galactic Empire," she said, and her voice came through in perfect Galactic common. Then she repeated herself in the next language and the next and the next. In moments, those listening realized she was speaking every known language in the galaxy, cycling through all 847 at once on different channels. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Nations Space Command vessel Indomitable. Humanity requests an audience with the Galactic Council and Empress Calith 9. You have 24 hours to respond." The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun. Silence filled the bridge of the Eternal Glory. Then chaos erupted. "Humans?" someone whispered. "That's impossible. Humans are extinct. They were destroyed 3,000 years ago," another officer added. "Everyone knows the story. They were too aggressive, too violent. The Empire had no choice but to—" "Silence!" Vexthor roared. His mind raced. Humans, the Terran silence. Every child in the Empire learned about it in their history lessons. Humanity had emerged from their small blue world with weapons and ambition. They had expanded too quickly, colonized too aggressively, refused to accept imperial authority. The decision had been unanimous among the Council. The human species was too dangerous to exist. 50 imperial battle groups had descended upon every human world simultaneously. The war had lasted only 6 days. When it was over, humanity was gone. Earth was a burned cinder. Their colonies were smoking ruins. Their ships were debris fields. The Empire had made certain that nothing remained, or so they had believed. "Get me the Empress," Vexthor ordered. and mobilize the entire Grand Fleet. I want that ship surrounded and ready to fire on my command. On the surface of Throne Prime, in the Imperial Palace that had stood for 10,000 years, Empress Calith Nanim sat on her throne and watched the same transmission that everyone else had seen. Unlike everyone else, she did not look surprised. Her attendants whispered frantically around her, but she raised one ancient hand for silence. At nearly 4,000 years old, Calith 9 had ruled the Empire for longer than most species had possessed space travel. She had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. She had witnessed the birth and death of stars, and she had been there 3,000 years ago, when the Council had voted to exterminate humanity. She had been the only one to vote against it. "Your Majesty," her chief advisor said carefully, "this must be some kind of trick, a deception, perhaps another species using human appearance to—" "It is no deception," Calith said quietly. "I always knew they would return. I simply did not know when. But how could they survive? We destroyed everything. We made certain of nothing," the Empress interrupted. "We simply assumed our victory was complete because we wanted it to be." She stood slowly, her robes flowing around her like liquid silver. "Prepare the council chambers. Humanity has requested an audience, and we shall grant it. Send a response accepting their terms. Your Majesty, Admiral Vexthor requests permission to engage the vessel. Denied. Anyone who fires upon that ship will be charged with treason. Make that perfectly clear to the Admiral." High above, orbiting the palace, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched as hundreds of Imperial warships maneuvered into attack positions around her vessel. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, stood beside her, his hands clasped behind his back. "They're forming an encirclement pattern," Webb reported. "Standard Imperial aggressive posture. If they fire, we'll be hit from all sides simultaneously." "Let them position themselves," Chen said calmly. "They need to feel in control for a few more minutes." "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." "It's from the Empress herself," Chen nodded. "Put it through." The holographic display shimmered and the ancient face of Calith 9 appeared. For a long moment, the two women simply looked at each other across the vast distance between ship and planet. "Captain Chen," the Empress said finally, "I accept your request for an audience. The Council will convene in 6 hours. You may send a shuttle to the surface and I guarantee safe passage under my personal authority." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Chen replied. "However, I will not be coming alone. I will be bringing evidence that I believe the Council needs to see." "Evidence of what?" "Evidence of why humanity disappeared 3,000 years ago. Evidence of what really happened during the Terran silence. And evidence of 47 other species that the Empire has conveniently forgotten about over the past 12,000 years. The color drained from the Empress's face. "Captain, I urge you to consider carefully what you are about to do. There are forces within the Empire that will not react well to—" "We have been considering this moment for 3,000 years, Your Majesty. We are quite certain of our course of action." The transmission ended. On the bridge of the Eternal Glory, Admiral Vexthor watched the exchange and felt his blood turn cold. Evidence. 47 other species. She was going to tell them. She was going to reveal the truth that the Empire had buried beneath 12 millennia of lies and propaganda. He couldn't allow that. "All ships," he commanded quietly. "When the human shuttle launches for the surface, intercept and destroy it. Make it look like an accident. A malfunction in our targeting computers. The chaos of having so many ships in close proximity. Sir, the Empress has guaranteed safe passage. She has threatened treason charges." "The Empress is old and foolish," Vexthor snapped. "She does not understand what is at stake. If the truth comes out, the Empire will collapse. 847 systems will descend into chaos. Trillions will die in the resulting wars. We are protecting civilization itself." His officers exchanged uncertain glances, but none of them argued further. They had their orders. Below, in her private chambers, the Empress sat alone and accessed a data archive that had been sealed for 3,000 years. She input her personal codes, bypassing security measures that would have stopped anyone else in the galaxy. The file opened, and she began to read the true history of humanity's first contact with the Empire. What she saw made her close her eyes in shame. The official Imperial record stated that humans had fired first, that they had been the aggressors, that the Empire had acted in self-defense. But the sealed files told a different story. They showed Imperial ships arriving at Earth with weapons already charged. They showed human diplomats being fired upon as they approached in unarmed vessels. They showed systematic destruction of every human colony, every orbital station, every ship in space, and they showed the orders that had authorized it all, signed by the Council of that era. The reasoning was simple and brutal. Humanity had developed faster-than-light travel in only 200 years from their first satellite. They had colonized 20 systems in just 50 years. If left unchecked, they would become a rival power within a few centuries. The Empire had not acted in self-defense. They had acted in fear. Kaleth had read these files once before, 3,000 years ago, when she had been a newly crowned empress. She had voted against the extermination, but she had been overruled. And then, in her shame and cowardice, she had sealed the files and tried to forget. But some sins cannot be forgotten. On the Indomitable, Captain Sarah Chen stood before a large window looking down at the world that had ordered her species destroyed. Behind her, the ship's historian, Dr. James Park, approached quietly. "Captain, we're ready. All the data has been compiled. 3,000 years of evidence, testimony from the survivors who escaped, genetic records of the 47 other species that the Empire destroyed before us, archaeological evidence from dead worlds. We have everything we need." "And the fleet?" Chen asked without turning. "Holding position in phase space exactly as planned. 500 ships waiting for your signal." Chen nodded slowly. "My great-grandmother died on Earth when the Imperial ships came. She was a teacher, 5 years old. She was in her classroom when the plasma bombardment began." She finally turned to look at Dr. Park. "For 3,000 years our people have lived in hiding, building in secret, preparing for this moment. Some of our people wanted revenge. They wanted to return with weapons blazing and burn every Imperial world to ash. But that's not what we're doing," Dr. Park said softly. "No," Chen agreed. "Because if we become like them, then they win. If we respond to genocide with genocide, then we prove that they were right to fear us." She straightened her uniform. "We're going to do something much more dangerous. We're going to show them the truth. We're going to make them face what they've done. And we're going to demand justice, not vengeance." "The Admiral up there doesn't seem like the type to accept that distinction," Dr. Park warned. Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then he's going to learn a very important lesson about what humanity became during our 3,000 years in exile. We didn't just survive. We evolved. We adapted. And we became something that the Empire has never encountered before." "What's that?" "A species that can't be killed, can't be detected, and can't be stopped. But most importantly, a species that remembers every single thing that was done to us." She turned back to the window. "In 6 hours, the Council will convene. In 6 hours, the Empire will learn that the ghosts of their past have come home. And in 6 hours, the galaxy will change forever. Far below, on the surface of Throne Prime, in the streets and homes and meeting places of 1,000 different species, people looked up at the sky and saw the dark ship hovering above their capital. They did not know its name. They did not know its purpose. But somehow they all knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The 24-hour countdown had begun. 3,000 years ago, the sensors on Earth had detected them first. 20 massive vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Humanity had only achieved FTL capability 15 years earlier, and their diplomats had been excited, terrified, and hopeful all at once. First contact with an alien civilization. The moment that would define humanity's future among the stars. Dr. Sarah Martinez stood in the command center of the United Earth Space Authority, watching the incoming ships with a mixture of wonder and concern. Something about their approach pattern felt wrong. They were not broadcasting greetings or requests for communication. They were simply advancing, weapons ports already open. "Try hailing them again," she ordered. "No response, Director," the communications officer replied. "We've sent messages in every mathematical language we can devise. We've transmitted our entire cultural database. They're receiving our signals, but they're not responding." "Deploy the diplomatic vessels," Martinez commanded. "Unarmed shuttles with full transponder identification. Make it absolutely clear we come in peace." 3 small shuttles launched from Luna Base, their hulls painted white with the symbol of Earth, a blue and green sphere, prominently displayed. They carried humanity's best diplomats, linguists, and scientists. They carried gifts of art, music, and mathematics. They carried the hope of an entire species. The Imperial ships fired without warning. The diplomatic shuttles became clouds of expanding debris in an instant. On Earth, billions of people watched, in horror as their representatives were murdered. In the cold vacuum of space, Dr. Martinez felt her legs give way as she collapsed into her chair. "Ready, all defense platforms," she whispered. "Evacuate the cities. Get as many people underground as possible. God help us all." The Empire's attack was methodical and complete. They started with Earth's orbital infrastructure, destroying every satellite, every station, every ship in space. Then they moved to the colonies. Mars base was hit with plasma weapons that turned its domes into molten slag in seconds. The settlements on Europa, Titan, and Ganymede were next. The mining operations in the asteroid belt were vaporized. Then they came for Earth itself. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. Every major city was targeted. Every military installation was destroyed. Every center of government, every university, every hospital, every school. The Empire's weapons were precise and devastating. They did not want to crack the planet apart. They wanted to exterminate its population while leaving the world intact for future colonization. But humanity did not die quietly. In those final hours, as the world burned, Dr. Martinez and her team activated Protocol Exodus. Hidden bases on the edges of human space, built in secret as a precaution against exactly this scenario, came online. 37 colony ships disguised as cargo vessels and mining stations activated their drives and fled into deep space. Each one carried 10,000 people in cryosleep. Each one carried the collected knowledge of human civilization. Each one carried seeds, genetic samples, and the tools needed to rebuild. And each one carried a message recorded by Dr. Martinez in her final moments, as the command center shook from nearby impacts. "To whoever survives," she said, blood running down her face from a wound above her eye. "Remember this day. Remember what they took from us. Remember every person who died for no reason other than fear and greed. But do not let rage consume you. Survive, adapt, grow stronger. And when you are ready, when you are certain you can succeed, return. Return and demand justice. Return and make them answer for what they have done. We will remember. We will return. We will have justice." The transmission ended when the command center took a direct hit. Dr. Martinez died instantly, along with the 300 people working beside her. Captain Sarah Chen had been 5 years old when the Empire came. Her great-grandmother had been one of those who died on Earth that day. Chen had been born 200 years later on New Terra, the first world that the fleeing humans had settled in the dark spaces between the galaxy's spiral arms. She had grown up on stories of Earth, of the world that had been stolen from her people, of the lives that had been taken. Now standing in the council chambers of Throne Prime, she prepared to show the Empire exactly what they had done. The council chambers were enormous, a circular room with seating for representatives from all 847 species in the Empire. The ceiling was transparent, showing the stars above and the dark shape of the Indomitable hovering directly overhead. It was a deliberate choice on Chen's part. She wanted them to remember that humanity was not alone, not anymore. Empress Kalith Nanin sat on a throne at the center of the chamber, elevated above all others. Around her, arranged in concentric circles, the representatives of the Empire took their seats. Some looked curious. Some looked hostile. Most looked confused. Admiral Vexthor stood near the military section, his 4 eyes fixed on Chen with undisguised hatred. "The Council recognizes Captain Sarah Chen of the vessel Indomitable," the Empress announced formally. "You have requested this audience. Speak." Chen walked to the center of the chamber and with a gesture, activated the holographic projectors built into the floor. Immediately, images began to appear in the air above the assembled representatives. Images of Earth as it had been. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, a beautiful world. 3,000 years ago, Chen began, her voice clear and strong. Humanity made first contact with the Galactic Empire. We were young, excited, and hopeful. We sent diplomats in unarmed vessels to greet your ships. The hologram changed, showing the white diplomatic shuttles approaching the Imperial fleet. Your ships destroyed them without warning, without communication, without mercy. The representatives watched in silence as the hologram showed the shuttles exploding. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "The official Imperial records state that humanity fired first," Chen continued. "That we were the aggressors. That the Empire acted in self-defense." She looked directly at the Empress. Would you like to tell the council the truth, Your Majesty? Or shall I? Caliph Knight, his ancient face showed no emotion. Show them your evidence, Captain. Chen nodded and activated the next sequence. The hologram now showed classified Imperial documents, the ones that the Empress had sealed 3,000 years ago. Orders for the extermination of humanity, strategic planning documents, communications between Imperial admirals discussing the human problem, and the decision to eliminate the threat before it grows. We were not a threat, Chen said quietly. We were a possibility. We developed FTL travel quickly, yes. We colonized aggressively, yes. But we never attacked anyone. We never threatened anyone. We were simply too successful, too fast, and the Empire decided that we needed to die for it. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted questions and accusations. Some demanded to know if the documents were authentic. Others began pulling up their own species' historical records, suddenly questioning their own first contact stories. Order, the Empress commanded, her voice carrying surprising power for someone so ancient. The documents are authentic. I verified them myself. The Imperial Council of 3,000 years ago ordered the extermination of humanity based on fear, not fact. It was genocide, plain and simple, and I was there. I voted against it. I am one of the few living witnesses to that decision. The silence that followed was deafening. Chen let it stretch for a moment before continuing. But humanity was not the first species that the Empire destroyed. And we were not the last. The hologram changed again, now showing images of other worlds, other species. Some of the representatives gasped as they recognized extinct civilizations from their own historical records. The Kathrani Collective, Chen announced, and the hologram showed a species of tall crystalline beings. Exterminated 4,000 years ago for refusing to accept imperial economic regulations. In reality, they had discovered a new form of energy generation that would have made imperial fuel monopolies obsolete. She continued, image after image, species after species. The Zephyr Communion, the Bright Singers, the Stoneweavers, the Dreamwalkers. 47 species in total, all destroyed by imperial action over the past 12,000 years. Some were called accidents. Some were called rebellions that needed to be suppressed. Some were simply erased from history entirely. Lies, Stor shouted, standing abruptly. This is propaganda designed to destabilize the Empire. The human is showing you fabricated evidence. The evidence is not fabricated, said a voice from the entrance to the chamber. Everyone turned to see an elderly alien enter, supported by 2 guards. His species was one that many present recognized but few had seen in person. The archivists, a race dedicated to preserving historical truth, rarely left their library worlds. Archivist Tollivam, the Empress said, surprise evident in her voice. We did not summon you. No, the archivist replied, shuffling slowly toward the center of the chamber. But when I heard that humanity had returned, I knew that I needed to be here. I knew that the truth would finally be spoken. He looked at Chen and nodded respectfully. Everything she has shown you is accurate. My people have records of all 47 exterminations. We have documented evidence. We have survivor testimonies from the few who escaped. We have kept this knowledge safe for precisely this moment. Bexthor's scales rippled with rage. This is a conspiracy. The archivists have been compromised. Sit down, Admiral, the Empress said coldly, or I will have you removed. Bexthor sat, but his eyes never left Chen. The question now, Chen said, is what the Council intends to do about this information. Humanity did not return for conquest. We did not return for revenge. We returned for justice. Justice? One of the representatives called out. What form would this justice take? Do you demand reparations? Territory? The right to punish those responsible? We demand 3 things, Chen replied. First, a full and public acknowledgement of what was done. Second, the release of all sealed historical records so that every species in the Empire can learn the truth about their own first contact. And third, the establishment of an independent judicial body to investigate imperial actions and hold those responsible accountable. And if we refuse? Bexthor asked dangerously. Chen smiled, but there was ice in her expression. Then you will learn what 3,000 years of preparation means. You will learn what humanity built while we were supposedly extinct. You will learn why your sensors could not detect our ship, why your weapons could not lock onto us, why we can appear and disappear at will. You threaten us with war? another representative demanded. No, Chen said simply. I threaten you with truth, with transparency, with the end of the lies that the Empire has built itself upon. War would be simple. War would be quick. But what we offer is much more dangerous. We offer you the chance to choose justice willingly. We offer you the opportunity to transform the Empire into something better. We offer you peace, but only if you are brave enough to face what you have done. Lieutenant Marcus Webb watched the proceedings from the Indomitable, monitoring the security feeds and sensor data. Something was wrong. He could feel it. The way Admiral Vexthor was positioned, the way certain military vessels were adjusting their orbits, the increased communications traffic on encrypted Imperial military channels. Captain, he said quietly into his communicator, I think you need to cut this short. The Admiral is planning something. On the planet's surface, Chen received the message through her discreet earpiece. She glanced up at the transparent ceiling, at her ship hovering above, and made a decision. This council has 24 hours to respond to our demands, she announced. During that time, I invite all representatives to review the evidence we have provided. Speak with your people, search your own historical archives, and ask yourselves one question. If the Empire lied about humanity, what else have they lied about? She turned to leave, but Vexthor's voice stopped her. You say you do not want war, human, but you come here with threats and accusations. You destabilize the oldest and greatest civilization in the galaxy with your conspiracy theories. Perhaps the Council was right 3,000 years ago. Perhaps humanity is too dangerous to exist. Chen turned back to face him. Admiral, 3,000 years ago your people destroyed our world and killed billions of our people because you were afraid of what we might become. You created the very enemy you feared. We spent 3,000 years learning, growing, and preparing, not for revenge but for this moment. The moment when we would return and show you that humanity's greatest strength was never our weapons or our technology. It was our ability to choose mercy even when we have been shown none. She paused at the entrance to the chamber. But make no mistake, Admiral. We will defend ourselves, and if you force us to demonstrate our capabilities, you will discover that 3,000 years is a very long time to prepare for a war we desperately hope to avoid. As Chen's shuttle returned to the Indomitable, Vexthor sat in the council chambers and made his decision. He could not allow this to continue. The Empire would fall if the truth came out. Billions would die in the chaos. Someone needed to make the hard choice, the necessary choice. Someone needed to eliminate the human threat once and for all. He activated his personal communicator. All loyal ships, this is Admiral Vexthor. Authorization code Crimson Phoenix. Ignore all previous orders from the Empress. Target the human vessel. Fire on my mark. High above Throne Prime, the Indomitable detected the weapons lock immediately. 200 Imperial warships had just gone active, their weapons charging. Their targeting computers finally managing to paint the human ship with targeting solutions. Captain, Webb reported urgently. We have multiple active locks. They're going to fire. Chen took her seat on the bridge and took a deep breath. Then it is time we showed them what humanity has become. Activate phase space generators. Prepare for combat demonstration protocol, and send the signal to Earth Command. Ma'am, are you certain? Once we do this, there is no going back. Chen looked at the view screen, at the world below that had ordered her species destroyed, at the empire that had built itself on lies and genocide, at the future that hung in the balance. Send the signal, Lieutenant. It is time the Empire learned to fear the dark. The first salvo came from 17 directions at once. Plasma bolts, missile swarms, and coherent energy beams converged on the Indomitable in a display of firepower that could have destroyed a small moon. Every sensor in the fleet tracked the weapons, calculating impact, predicting the massive explosion that would scatter debris across half the orbital space above Throne Prime. The weapons passed through the ship as if it were not there. On the bridge of the Eternal Glory, Admiral Vexthor stared at his displays in disbelief. The targeting computers showed successful hits. The weapon trajectories had been perfect, but the human ship continued to float serenely in orbit, completely undamaged. Not even a scorch mark marred its dark hull. Report, he shouted. The weapons officer looked pale, his hands shaking as he checked his console. Admiral, sensors indicate all weapons reached the target coordinates. But there was no impact. No explosion, no debris. It's as if the ship isn't really there. I can see it right in front of me, Vexthor roared. Fire again. All batteries. The Imperial fleet unleashed a second barrage, even more massive than the first. The space around the Indomitable lit up with weapons fire so dense that it should have been impossible for anything to survive. Throne Prime's orbital defense network joined in, adding their considerable firepower to the assault. Again, every weapon passed harmlessly through the human vessel. "They have phased into another dimension," said a quiet voice behind Vexthor. He turned to see the Empress's chief scientist, a small being from a species known for their theoretical physics expertise. "The ship exists in our space-time, but only partially. It is like looking at a reflection in water. You can see it, but you cannot touch it." "That is impossible," Vexthor said flatly. "The laws of physics do not allow—" "The laws of physics as we understand them," the scientist corrected gently. "Clearly humanity has moved beyond our understanding." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Chen watched the display showing the Imperial weapons fire passing through her ship's position. Around her, the crew worked calmly at their stations, unconcerned by the massive firepower being directed at them. "Phase space generators holding at 30%, Lieutenant Webb reported. "We could go deeper if needed, but this seems to be making the point effectively." "Agreed," Chen said. "Tactical, prepare for demonstration sequence 1. Let us show them what we can do." The Indomitable shimmered and vanished from sight entirely. One moment it was visible in orbit above the palace, and the next it was simply gone. Imperial sensors went wild, searching for any trace of the vessel. They found nothing. 3 seconds later, the human ship reappeared on the opposite side of the planet, thousands of kilometers from its previous position. Before the Imperial fleet could react, it vanished again, and reappeared above a major military installation on Throne Prime's largest moon. Then it was gone and back above the palace. Each jump happened instantaneously, with no detectable energy signature and no transit time. "They are teleporting," the scientist whispered in awe. "Not jumping through hyperspace, but actually moving through another dimension where normal space does not exist. The military applications are— They could attack any point in the Empire from anywhere at any time. We would never see them coming." Vexthor felt cold fear creeping up his spine. "All ships fall back to defensive positions around the planet. Activate all shields. Ready point defense systems." "Admiral," the communications officer interrupted. "We are receiving a transmission from the human vessel." Captain Chen's image appeared on the main screen. She looked perfectly calm, almost sympathetic. "Admiral Vexthor, you have just witnessed phase space translation. My ship can exist in your reality or outside of it as we choose. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your sensors cannot truly track us. We can appear anywhere in your empire at any moment. Do you understand what this means?" "It means you are cowards," Vexthor spat, "hiding in another dimension rather than facing us in honorable combat." "It means," Chen replied patiently, "that we learned from history. 3,000 years ago, humanity faced the Empire's military might and lost because we relied on honor and directness. We assumed that other species would meet us fairly. We were wrong, and billions of our people died for that mistake." Her expression hardened. "We will never make that mistake again. We spent 3,000 years developing technology specifically designed to counter everything the Empire has. And now I will demonstrate exactly how thoroughly we succeeded." The Indomitable phased back into normal space directly, in front of the Eternal Glory, so close that Vexthor could see details on its hull. Through his view screen, weapon ports opened along the human ship's side, revealing weaponry that no Imperial analyst could identify. "Captain Chen," the Empress's voice suddenly cut in on an emergency channel. "I am ordering Admiral Vexthor to stand down. Please do not escalate this situation." "Your Majesty," Chen replied, her eyes still fixed on Vexthor. "With respect, the Admiral escalated this situation when he fired on a diplomatic vessel in direct violation of your safe passage guarantee. He needs to understand the consequences of his actions." "You would start a war over this?" Vexthor challenged. "No, Admiral. I am trying to prevent one, by showing you that war with humanity is not something you can win. Observe." The Indomitable fired a single pulse from one of its weapons. The beam was blue-white and moved almost too fast to track. It struck the Eternal Glory directly, and every system on the flagship immediately shut down. Lights went dark. Displays flickered and died. Life support switched to emergency backup. The mighty battleship went completely silent. "What have you done?" Vexthor demanded, his voice coming through on a backup communicator. "I have disabled your ship with a targeted electromagnetic pulse," Chen explained. Your systems will come back online in approximately 10 minutes. Nothing is permanently damaged. No one is hurt. But your ship is now helpless, and I can do this to every vessel in your fleet simultaneously if I choose to." As if to demonstrate, the Indomitable vanished and reappeared next to another Imperial warship. Another blue-white pulse, and that ship went dark. Then another and another. In the span of 2 minutes, Chen's ship had disabled 23 of the Empire's most powerful vessels, without firing a single weapon designed to kill. The Imperial fleet began to retreat in disorder. Ships that had been in perfect formation scattered, desperately trying to put distance between themselves and the human vessel that could appear and disappear at will. Some captains panicked and jumped to hyperspace, fleeing the system entirely. On Throne Prime's surface, billions of beings watched the display through their various communication devices. The mighty Imperial fleet, the force that had maintained order across 847 systems for 12,000 years, was being effortlessly defeated by a single human ship. In the council chambers, representatives shouted over each other in panic and confusion. Some demanded that the Empress surrender immediately. Others called for a full military mobilization. A few simply sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they were witnessing. Empress Kalith Naim stood from her throne and raised her hands for silence. When the chamber finally quieted, she spoke with a voice that carried across the room. 3,000 years ago, I voted against the extermination of humanity. I argued that we should not destroy a species simply because they might one day become powerful. I was overruled, and I have carried that shame for 3 millennia. She looked around at the assembled representatives. Today, humanity has proven that they did indeed become powerful beyond anything we imagined. They could destroy us all, could burn every world in the Empire to ash, and we would be helpless to stop them. She paused, letting that sink in. But they have not. Instead, they have disabled our ships without killing anyone. They have presented evidence of our crimes without demanding immediate punishment. They have offered us a choice, justice or continued war. And that choice is more mercy than we showed them 3,000 years ago. Your Majesty, one of the representatives called out, if we accept their terms, if we acknowledge these crimes, the Empire will fall apart. The other species will rebel. Chaos will consume everything we have built. Then perhaps we have built our civilization on a foundation that deserves to crumble, Kalith replied softly. Perhaps it is time we built something better. High above, the Indomitable returned to its position over the palace. Captain Chen sat in her command chair and took a deep breath. The demonstration was over. She had proven humanity's capabilities without killing anyone. Now came the difficult part. Lieutenant Webb, she said quietly. Send the signal to the fleet. It is time. Webb hesitated for just a moment before activating the quantum communicator. The signal traveled through phase space instantaneously, reaching across thousands of light years to where the rest of humanity's fleet waited in the dark between the stars. 500 ships received the signal and activated their phase space generators. On Throne Prime, every sensor suddenly went insane. Spatial anomalies were forming everywhere, all across the system, not just above the capital, but above military installations, shipyards, training facilities, and command centers on 500 different worlds throughout the Empire. The human fleet materialized in perfect synchronization. 500 warships, each one similar in design to the Indomitable, appeared in the skies of 500 Imperial military worlds. They took up positions directly above the most important military facilities in the Empire, hovering in clear view like dark promises of what could happen if humanity chose violence over justice. The display was precise, coordinated, and absolutely terrifying. In one moment, the Empire learned that humanity had not sent a single ship to demand justice. They had sent an entire fleet, and that fleet could strike anywhere at any time. Every communication channel in the Empire suddenly activated simultaneously. Captain Chen's image appeared on billions of screens across 847 systems. When she spoke, her voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of steel. People of the Galactic Empire, my name is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Nations Space Command. 3,000 years ago, your empire destroyed my species' homeworld and attempted to exterminate us completely. You succeeded in killing billions of innocent people. You did not succeed in killing us all. She paused, letting that sink in. For 3,000 years, humanity has lived in the dark spaces between your stars. We have survived. We have grown. We have prepared. And now we have returned, not as the victims you tried to destroy, but as something new, something stronger, something that your empire's greatest minds never imagined possible. The image changed, showing views from the 500 ships positioned above 500 worlds. You are seeing the human fleet. Each of these vessels is positioned above a military installation in your empire. Each one has the capability to disable every ship, every weapon, every system in their target area. We could cripple your entire military infrastructure in minutes. The displays returned to Chen's face. But we have not. We will not. Because humanity learned something during our 3,000 years in exile. We learned that strength without mercy makes you a monster. We learned that revenge without justice makes you the villain. We learned that the true measure of a civilization is not how it treats its equals, but how it treats those it has wronged. She leaned forward slightly. We offer the Empire a choice. Accept our terms for justice, accountability, and reform. Allow an independent investigation into imperial actions over the past 12,000 years. Allow the truth to be known, whatever the consequences. Do this and humanity will stand with you as partners in building something better. Her expression hardened. Or refuse. Continue to hide behind lies and propaganda. Continue to believe that your military might makes you invincible, and learn what it means to face an enemy that you cannot see, cannot track, and cannot stop. An enemy that will dismantle your empire piece by piece. Not through destruction, but through the slow, methodical exposure of every crime you have committed, every lie you have told, every species you have destroyed. The transmission ended, leaving billions of beings across the Empire in stunned silence. In the council chambers on Throne Prime, Admiral Vexthor stood slowly. His scales had lost their color, and he looked suddenly old and defeated. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "I acted against your orders. I endangered the Empire through my arrogance and fear. I submit myself for judgment." The Empress looked at him for a long moment. "Admiral, you are hereby relieved of command and placed under arrest pending a full investigation into your actions. Guards, escort him to confinement." As Vexthor was led away, the Empress turned to face the assembled council. "Representatives of the Galactic Empire, you have seen what I have seen. You have heard what I have heard. Humanity has presented us with evidence of crimes spanning 12 millennia. They have demonstrated military capabilities far beyond our own, and they have offered us a choice between justice and destruction." She took a deep breath. "I propose that we accept their terms. I propose that we open all sealed historical archives. I propose that we establish an independent judicial body to investigate imperial actions and hold those responsible accountable. I propose that we begin the difficult work of transforming this empire into something worthy of the civilizations that inhabit it." "Your Majesty," one of the representatives called out nervously, "if we do this, other species will learn what was done to them. They will demand independence. They will rebel. The empire will fracture. Then perhaps the empire as it exists deserves to fracture." Calith replied, "Perhaps it is time we stopped ruling through fear and deception. Perhaps it is time we built a true coalition of equals." The vote took 3 hours. When it was done, the result was clear. 612 representatives voted to accept humanity's terms. 183 voted against. 52 abstained. The Galactic Empire, which had stood for 12,000 years through force and intimidation, had just voted to hold itself accountable for its crimes. On the Indomitable, Captain Chen received the notification and allowed herself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete. Humanity had returned from extinction, demonstrated their power, and forced the Empire to face its past. But as Lieutenant Webb approached with a concerned expression, she knew that the real challenges were just beginning. "Captain," Webb said quietly, "we are detecting a massive spatial disturbance at the edge of the system. Something big is jumping in, something that is not using human or imperial technology." Chen's smile faded. "Identify it." "Unknown, ma'am." "But the energy signature is ancient, really ancient, and it is heading directly for Throne Prime." Chen stood and looked at the display. A new contact was appearing on the sensors, something larger than any ship in either the human or imperial fleets. And it was broadcasting on frequencies that predated both civilizations by millennia. "Sound general alert," Chen ordered. The vessel that emerged from the spatial distortion was unlike anything in imperial or human records. It was not a ship in the traditional sense, but rather a construct of pure energy, contained within geometric patterns, that hurt to look at directly. It measured 50 kilometers across and radiated power on a scale that made even the combined fleets seem insignificant. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the sensor readings climb higher and higher. Lieutenant Webb, are our shields even going to register against something that powerful? Honestly, Captain, I do not think so, Webb replied, his voice tight with tension. Whatever that thing is, it operates on a level of technology we have never encountered. It makes phase space look like primitive fire-making. We are receiving a transmission, the communications officer announced. Audio only. It is broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously, including some we did not even know existed. Put it through, Chen ordered. A voice filled the bridge. It was not mechanical, but neither was it truly organic. It sounded like multiple beings speaking in perfect harmony, creating words from pure sound and thought. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in the mind as much as through the ears. Younger species of this region, we are the Covenant of Shadows. We have observed your confrontation with interest. We now invoke our right as arbiters to judge the outcome of this experiment. Chen felt ice run through her veins. Experiment? On Throne Prime, the Empress stood in the council chambers, staring up at the massive energy construct visible through the transparent ceiling. Around her, representatives from 847 species cowered or fled. Only the archivist Old Tollivam remained calm. He approached the Empress slowly. Your Majesty, he said quietly, I believe I know what this is. My people have legends about the shadows. They are said to be one of the first civilizations to achieve space travel, more than 100,000 years ago. They have not been seen in this region of space for millennia. What do they want? Calith asked. According to the legends, they test younger species. They create scenarios, introduce conflicts, and watch how civilizations respond. They are trying to understand which species will evolve toward wisdom and which toward destruction. The Empress turned to look at him, horror dawning in her ancient eyes. You mean they have been manipulating us? The war with humanity, all of it was their experiment. I believe so, Your Majesty. And now they have come to evaluate the results. The voice of the Covenant spoke again, now broadcasting to every being in the system. 12,000 years ago, we provided the Galactic Empire with certain technologies, advanced weapons, surveillance systems, the ability to detect and track any faster-than-light vessel in your region of space. We did this to see how you would use such power. On the Indomitable, Chen listened with growing anger. They gave the Empire the tools they needed for genocide. 3,000 years ago, the voice continued, we introduced phase space technology to a small group of humans fleeing from imperial aggression. We embedded the mathematical principles in ruins they would discover, guiding their research and development. We did this to see if they would use such power for revenge or for justice. They manipulated us too, Webb said quietly. Our entire technological advancement was guided by them. Our phase space generators, our stealth systems, everything we thought we invented ourselves. You have been observed, the Covenant announced. Your choices have been recorded. Your evolution has been measured. And now we will render judgment. Captain Chen felt rage building inside her. 3,000 years of suffering, billions of deaths, the destruction of Earth. All of it had been part of someone else's experiment. She activated her communication system, broadcasting directly at the massive energy construct. Judgment? She said, her voice cold and controlled. You dare to talk about judgment? You gave the Empire the tools to commit genocide. You manipulated humanity into developing weapons of war. You turned us into game pieces for your entertainment. And now you have the audacity to judge us? The Covenant's response came immediately. We do not seek entertainment, Captain Chen. We seek understanding. The universe is full of young species that destroy themselves before reaching true enlightenment. We test them to identify those rare civilizations that choose wisdom over violence, justice over revenge. Your species and the Empire have just completed a test that has lasted 3 millennia. And what were the parameters of this test? The Empress demanded, her voice shaking with anger. What gave you the right to play with our lives? The test was simple. Would the Empire, when given overwhelming military superiority, choose to rule through justice or through fear? Would humanity, when given the power to enact revenge, choose mercy or destruction? The Empire failed the first test when they attempted to exterminate humanity rather than negotiate. Humanity passed the second test when they returned with power, but offered justice instead of genocide. On Throne Prime's surface, in the streets and buildings and homes of billions of beings, people looked up at the sky and felt the weight of this revelation. Their entire civilization, all of their history, had been manipulated by beings so far beyond them that they seemed like gods. In the council chambers, Admiral Vexthor, who had been held in confinement, was brought back by the guards who no longer seemed to care about protocol. He listened to the Covenant's words and felt something break inside him. "I was programmed," he said softly. "My entire species, we were elevated by serving the Empire. We were given positions of military authority. We were encouraged to be aggressive, to see threats everywhere, to strike first and ask questions later. It was not my choice. It was never my choice." The archivist placed a gentle hand on Vexthor's arm. "Free will is complicated, Admiral. Yes, you were influenced. Yes, your culture was shaped by the Covenant's manipulation, but you still made choices. We all did. The question is what we choose now that we know the truth." The Covenant spoke again. "The Empire failed its test, but individual members of Imperial society showed capacity for growth. The Empress, who voted against genocide, the Archivist, who preserved truth even when it was dangerous, common citizens who questioned their government's actions. These indicate that the Empire can evolve given proper guidance." "We do not want your guidance," Chen said firmly. "We do not want to be your experiment anymore. Humanity and the Empire will determine our own futures, without interference from ancient powers who treat civilizations like laboratory subjects." There was a long pause. When the Covenant spoke again, there was something almost like surprise in their harmonized voice. "Interesting. You reject the wisdom of those who came before you?" "We reject the idea that wisdom gives you the right to manipulate others," Chen replied. "You may be ancient. You may be powerful. But that does not make you right. True wisdom would recognize that every species has the right to make their own mistakes and learn from them without interference. You speak boldly for one whose civilization nearly died." "Completely," the Covenant observed. "I speak from experience," Chen countered. "Humanity was nearly destroyed because we were not strong enough to defend ourselves. But we survived and we learned and we became something greater, not because you guided us toward phase-space technology, but because we refused to let tragedy define us. We chose to become better than those who tried to destroy us. That was our choice, not yours." Lieutenant Webb leaned close to Chen and whispered urgently, "Captain, I am detecting power buildups in that construct. I think they may be preparing to do something." Chen nodded slightly but continued addressing the Covenant. "You say you have been testing species for 100,000 years. How many have passed your tests?" 17 civilizations have demonstrated the wisdom necessary to join the greater community of the Covenant replied. "And how many have you exterminated or allowed to be exterminated during your experiments?" "Silence, how many?" Chen pressed. 473 civilizations have been removed from consideration due to failure of critical tests. The number struck the system like a physical blow. 473 species, trillions upon trillions of lives, all sacrificed to the Covenant's experiments. "You are monsters," Chen said quietly. "You are worse than the Empire ever was. At least they were honest about their brutality. You hide behind claims of wisdom and enlightenment while playing with lives across the entire galaxy. We seek to preserve the universe from self-destructive species," the Covenant stated. "Young civilizations with advanced technology inevitably destroy themselves unless properly guided. We prevent such catastrophes by identifying dangerous species early and eliminating them before they can spread." "No," the Empress's voice cut in. She had accessed the communication system from the council chambers. "You do not prevent catastrophes. You cause them. You give species the tools for genocide and then judge them when they use those tools. You manipulate civilizations into conflict and then claim you are testing them. You are not preventing destruction. You are engineering it." "The Empress speaks truth," Archivist Tulvam added. "I have spent my life studying history, and I have seen patterns I could not explain. Wars that seemed to start for no reason. Technologies that appeared suddenly in multiple civilizations at once. Species that rose to power impossibly quickly, only to fall just as fast. It was all you, was it not? You have been manipulating the galactic community for millennia. We have been guiding evolution toward optimal outcomes," the Covenant corrected. "Species that cannot be trusted with power must not be allowed to spread. Surely you understand this necessity." "What I understand," Chen said, "is that you are afraid. You are an ancient civilization that has stagnated. You no longer grow or innovate. So instead you test younger species, hoping to find something that impresses you, something that makes you feel less alone in your ancient superiority. But you are terrified that a younger species might surpass you, so you manipulate us into destroying ourselves before we can become a threat. The energy patterns in the Covenant construct shifted violently. When they spoke again, the harmonious voice had an edge to it. You presume much, Captain Chen. We could eliminate both your species and the Empire in moments. We have done so to civilizations far more advanced than yours. Then do it, Chen challenged. Prove that you are exactly what I said you are. Prove that your wisdom is just fear dressed up in ancient robes. Prove that you cannot tolerate the idea of younger species making their own choices. On Earth, in the hidden command centers where humanity's leadership monitored the confrontation, admirals and presidents held their breath. Captain Chen was gambling with the survival of their entire species. But she was also calling a bluff. You will not destroy us, Chen continued. Because if you do, you prove that your entire philosophy is wrong. You claim to test species to find those worthy of advancement. But the truth is, you test species to find reasons to destroy them. You manipulate civilizations into failure and then blame them for failing your rigged experiments. We offer a choice, Chen said. And now her voice carried across every communication channel in the system, reaching every human, every imperial citizen, every being listening. Humanity and the Empire reject the Covenant of Shadows. We reject their test. We reject their manipulation. We reject their claim to judge us. She paused, letting that declaration sink in. We choose to make our own mistakes and learn from them. We choose to determine our own futures without ancient powers steering us toward predetermined outcomes. And we invite every other species listening to make the same choice. Reject the Covenant. Reject their experiments. Take control of your own destiny. The Covenant's construct pulsed with energy. For a moment it seemed they would unleash their power and prove Chen wrong. The entire human fleet prepared to phase into another dimension, knowing they could not win against such power but prepared to try anyway. Then something unexpected happened. The Covenant laughed. It was not cruel or mocking. It was genuine amusement mixed with something that might have been respect. 3,000 years ago, humanity was destroyed for being too aggressive and independent. Today, humanity has proven to be exactly those things, and this time, we find it admirable rather than threatening. The Covenant's voice had changed, becoming less formal, more personal. You are correct, Captain Chen. We are afraid. We are ancient and powerful and very, very alone. We have been searching for civilizations that could stand as equals, but we kept sabotaging them because we could not bear the thought of truly sharing the universe. The massive construct began to shift, its energy patterns changing. You have passed a test we did not intend to create. You have rejected the testers themselves. In 100,000 years, only one other species has done this. They are now our partners, the only civilization we truly respect. I do not want your respect, Chen said coldly. I want you to leave this region of space and never return. I want you to stop manipulating young civilizations. I want you to let the galaxy evolve naturally. We cannot promise that, the Covenant replied. But we can promise that we will leave this region of space for the next 10,000 years. We will not interfere with humanity or the Empire or any species in this sector. You will have time to grow, to make mistakes, to learn on your own. And when we return in 10 millennia, we will see what you have become without our interference. And if we surpass you? Chen asked. Then we will be glad to finally have equals. True equals, not manipulated test subjects. The Covenant's construct began to fold in on itself, preparing to depart. But we leave you with one final warning. Not as manipulators, but as elders who have seen much. There are forces in this universe that make us seem primitive. There are dangers that we cannot protect you from. The galaxy is not as empty as you believe. When you are ready, when you have grown strong and wise on your own, you will need to face these threats. What threats? The Empress demanded. Discover them yourselves. Survive them yourselves. And then perhaps we can speak as true equals. The construct vanished, folding into dimensions that human and imperial science could not detect. One moment it was there, dominating the system, and the next it was gone as if it had never existed. In the silence that followed, Captain Chen sat down heavily in her command chair. Lieutenant Webb confirmed they are really gone. Confirmed, Captain. No energy signatures detected. No dimensional distortions. They have left the system entirely. Chen nodded slowly, then activated her communication system. Your Majesty, I believe we need to talk about what happens next, because we just learned that our conflict with the Empire is insignificant compared to what else is waiting for us in the galaxy. The Empress appeared on the view screen. She looked exhausted, as if the weight of centuries had suddenly become too much to bear. Captain Chen, I propose an alliance. Not empire and vassal, but true partners. We have both been manipulated, both been used. Perhaps it is time we work together to ensure no one ever uses us again. Chen considered for a moment, then nodded. I accept. But first, we need to fulfill the original agreement. Open the archives. Reveal the truth. Let every species know what was done to them. Only then can we build something genuine. Agreed, Caliph said. And Captain Chen, thank you. For 3,000 years I have carried the shame of what my empire did to your people. I cannot change the past, but perhaps we can build a better future. Perhaps we can, Your Majesty. Perhaps we can. 1 year later, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Imperial archives had been opened, and the truth had spread across 847 systems like wildfire. Species learned about their real first contacts with the Empire. Civilizations discovered that their history had been edited and sanitized. The lies that had held the Galactic Empire together for 12,000 years unraveled in a matter of months. Surprisingly, the Empire did not collapse. Instead, it transformed. Captain Sarah Chen stood in what had once been the Imperial Council chambers, but was now the Assembly of Free Worlds. The old throne where Empress Caliph IX had sat for thousands of years was gone, replaced by a circular arrangement of seats where representatives from each member species sat as equals. The transparent ceiling still showed the stars above, but now those stars represented hope instead of domination. The Assembly recognizes Ambassador Chen, announced Chancellor Tolvam. The old archivist had been elected to lead the transitional government, chosen specifically because his species had no military power and no political agenda beyond truth. Chen walked to the center of the chamber. She wore a formal uniform, dark blue with golden stars on her shoulders, representing not military rank but her position as humanity's voice in the new galactic order. Honored representatives, she began. 1 year ago, humanity returned from what the Empire believed was extinction. We came seeking justice for the billions of our people who were murdered. We came with the power to exact revenge but chose mercy instead. Today I stand before you to discuss the next step in our shared future. She activated a holographic display showing various star systems. The Terran Accords, which this assembly ratified 6 months ago, established 3 fundamental principles. First, no species may impose its will on another through force. Second, all historical records must be accessible to those they concern. Third, any species accused of crimes against other civilizations has the right to fair trial under a system of laws that applies equally to all. The representatives nodded. These principles had been hard-fought, negotiated over months of intense debate. Some species had wanted harsher penalties for the Empire's past actions. Others had wanted complete amnesty. The Terran Accords had found a middle path. Over the past year, we have begun implementing these principles, Chen continued. The trials of those responsible for genocide have concluded. Admiral Stor and 47 other Imperial military leaders have been found guilty and sentenced according to laws that did not exist when they committed their crimes, but which we all agreed represented justice. She paused, knowing this next part would be controversial. However, I am here today to request clemency for Admiral Stor and the others convicted. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted in surprise and anger. Some demanded to know if humanity had lost its mind. Others wondered if this was some kind of trick. Chancellor Tolvam called for order, and eventually the chamber quieted enough for Chen to continue. I request clemency not because I believe they are innocent, Chen explained, but because I believe that justice requires understanding. The Covenant of Shadows manipulated the Empire for millennia. They shaped cultures to be aggressive. They provided technologies designed to enable genocide. They created the conditions that made these crimes possible. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of species. Yes, Stor and the others made choices. Yes, they bear responsibility, but they were also victims of a system designed to produce exactly the behavior we punished them for. True justice requires that we acknowledge this complexity. What do you propose? Asked a representative from one of the species that had nearly been exterminated by Imperial forces. I propose that those convicted be released from prison and instead serve as educators, Chen said. Let them travel to every world in the assembly and tell their stories. Let them explain how they were manipulated, how they justified their actions, how they came to understand they were wrong. Let them become living examples of how even good people can commit terrible acts when placed in corrupted systems. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Empress Calith IX, who now sat among the representatives as one voice among many, stood slowly. "I support Ambassador Chen's proposal," she said, "not because the crimes committed were minor, but because I understand the weight of living with what you have done. I voted against humanity's extermination 3,000 years ago, but I did not fight hard enough to stop it. I allowed it to happen, and I have carried that shame every day since. Perhaps allowing these convicted individuals to use their experience to prevent future atrocities is a better form of justice than simply locking them away." The vote took 3 hours, but eventually the clemency proposal passed. The convicted would be released but would spend the next century traveling the galaxy, speaking about their crimes and how they had been manipulated into committing them. After the session ended, Chen found Lieutenant Marcus Webb waiting for her in one of the side chambers. He wore a different uniform now, one that combined elements of human and imperial design. He had volunteered to serve in the new peacekeeping fleet, a joint military force designed to protect all species from external threats. "That was a bold move, Captain," Webb said. Actually, she was not captain anymore. She had been promoted to ambassador and given a new mission, but Webb still used her old rank out of habit. "Some people are saying you went too soft." "Some people always say that," Chen replied with a slight smile. "But Marcus, we cannot build a better future by simply replacing old oppressors with new ones. Humanity's strength was never about being the strongest or the most ruthless. It was about being wise enough to know when to show mercy." "Speaking of the future," Webb said, his expression becoming more serious, "the joint exploration mission is ready to launch. The Horizon has completed all systems checks. Mixed crew of humans, Imperials, and representatives from 17 other species. Everyone is eager to begin exploring the regions beyond the known galaxy." Chen nodded. "And the warning from the Covenant? About greater threats waiting for us?" "We will face those threats when we find them," Webb said confidently. "But this time we will face them united. Human ingenuity, Imperial resources, and the combined knowledge of hundreds of species. Whatever is out there, we will handle it together." Chen walked to a window that looked out over Throne Prime City. The capital had changed dramatically over the past year. Where once it had been dominated by military installations and monuments to imperial power, now it hosted embassies from hundreds of worlds. The architecture reflected a dozen different cultural aesthetics. The streets were filled with beings from across the galaxy, trading ideas and technologies freely. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Chen asked quietly. "Choosing justice over revenge, mercy over punishment?" "I think we made the human choice," Webb replied. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors were destroyed because the Empire was afraid of what we might become. They saw our potential for violence and aggression, and they decided we were too dangerous to exist. But what they failed to understand was that humanity's greatest strength was never our capacity for violence. It was our capacity for growth, our ability to learn from mistakes, our refusal to let tragedy define us." He stepped beside her at the window. "We could have returned with weapons blazing and turned every imperial world into the same burning wreckage they made of Earth. Some of our people wanted exactly that. But instead, we showed them something they had never seen before, a species that had every reason to become monsters but chose to remain human." Chen smiled at that. "I like that phrase, chose to remain human. Maybe that should be our motto." "Too philosophical for a motto," Webb joked. "But I take your point." A communication device on Chen's wrist beeped softly. She activated it, and a holographic message appeared. It was from the Horizon, the joint exploration vessel preparing to launch. "Ambassador Chen," said the ship's captain, a being from a species that looked like crystalline formations, but spoke through harmonic vibrations. "We are ready for departure. Would you like to say a few words before we begin our journey?" Chen considered for a moment, then nodded. "Patch me through to all channels. I want everyone on that ship to hear this." A moment later, her image was being broadcast to the crew of the Horizon. 300 beings from 20 species all gathered to explore the unknown together. "Crew of the Horizon," Chen began. "1 year ago, humanity returned to the galaxy after 3,000 years in exile. We returned seeking justice, and we found something better. We found the possibility of redemption, not just for humanity or for the Empire, but for every species that has made mistakes and wants to do better. She paused, gathering her thoughts. You are embarking on a journey that will take you beyond the boundaries of known space. You will encounter things we cannot imagine. You will face dangers we cannot predict, but you will face them together as representatives of a new kind of civilization, one built not on domination or fear but on cooperation and mutual respect. The Covenant of Shadows warned us that there are greater threats waiting for us in the galaxy. Ancient powers and dangerous forces. They meant it as a warning, but I choose to see it as a challenge. Because humanity has faced impossible odds before and survived. The Empire has weathered storms that should have destroyed it and emerged stronger. Every species in the Assembly has overcome challenges that seemed insurmountable. She smiled. So go forth into the unknown with confidence. Explore strange new worlds. Seek out new life and new civilizations. And remember that you do not go alone. Behind you stands the combined strength of hundreds of worlds. Before you lies a universe full of wonders waiting to be discovered. And within you burns the spirit of exploration that defines every intelligent species that has ever looked up at the stars and wondered what lies beyond. The transmission ended, and Chen watched as the horizon lifted from its docking platform and accelerated toward the edge of the system. Its phase space generators, a gift from humanity to the Joint Exploration Program, activated smoothly. The ship shimmered and vanished, beginning its journey into the unknown. Do you think they will find what the Covenant warned us about? Webb asked. Probably, Chen admitted. But that is a problem for them to solve. Right now we have enough challenges here at home. She was right about that. The transformation of the Empire into the Assembly of Free Worlds was still in its early stages. There were species that resented the loss of imperial protection. There were others that wanted complete independence and saw the Assembly as just another form of control. There were economic disruptions as trade patterns adjusted to the new political reality. There were cultural conflicts as species that had never interacted directly suddenly found themselves as neighbors. But there was also hope. Real hope, perhaps for the first time in the galaxy's history. 6 months after the Horizon launched, Chen received an urgent transmission. She was in her office on Throne Prime, reviewing reports from various worlds, when the communication system activated with priority override codes. Ambassador Chen, said the face on the screen. It was Captain Shalara, the crystalline being who commanded the Horizon. But something was wrong. Her harmonics were erratic, suggesting extreme agitation. We have discovered something. You need to see this immediately. What did you find? Chen asked, already standing and moving toward her personal shuttle bay. A dead world on the far side of the galactic rim. It appears to be ancient, billions of years old. But, Ambassador, the structures on its surface, they match both human and imperial architectural styles. Not similar, identical. As if the same species that built the pyramids on Earth also built the temple complexes on Throne Prime's oldest continents. Chen felt cold wash over her. That is impossible. Humans and Imperials evolved independently, on opposite sides of the galaxy. That is what we thought, Shalara replied. But the evidence is undeniable. We have found ruins that predate both civilizations by millions of years. Ruins that suggest both species descended from the same ancient source. Ambassador, I think we just discovered why the Covenant was so interested in our conflict. I think we discovered why they manipulated both sides. Send me the coordinates, Chen said quickly, and do not touch anything until I arrive. She turned to Webb, who had been listening from across the room. Get the Indomitable ready for immediate departure. And contact the Empress. She needs to hear this too. 3 days later, Chen stood on the surface of the dead world looking at structures that should not exist. The ruins were massive, built from materials that had survived billions of years of erosion and cosmic radiation, and carved into every surface were symbols that represented both human languages and imperial script. Empress Calith Nime stood beside her, also staring at the impossible architecture. My people have legends, the Empress said quietly. Stories passed down from before we achieved spaceflight. Legends about the first ones, beings who came from the stars and taught us language, mathematics, art. We thought they were myths. Humans have similar legends, Chen admitted. Gods who descended from the heavens and gave us knowledge. We dismissed them as primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. But what if they were not myths? Asked Dr. James Park, humanities chief historian who had accompanied Chen on the journey. What if both species were seeded by the same ancient civilization? What if we are not naturally evolved species at all, but rather genetic descendants of something much older? Archivist Tolvam, who had also made the journey, examined a large carved stone tablet. His species could read energy patterns in ancient materials, allowing him to sense things others could not. This tablet contains information, he said slowly. Not just writing, but data encoded at the molecular level. Give me time and I can extract it. They gave him 3 days. During that time, Chen and the Empress walked through the ruins, discovering chamber after chamber of preserved artifacts. Libraries full of crystalline data storage, laboratories that still contained equipment too advanced to understand, living quarters designed for beings that looked remarkably similar to both humans and Imperials. On the 3rd day, Tolvam called them all together. His expression was troubled. I have extracted the data, he said, and the story it tells is both wonderful and terrifying. This world was called Origin. It was home to a species called the progenitors. They achieved spaceflight 8 million years ago and spread across the galaxy, seeding life on thousands of worlds. He activated a holographic display showing star maps. They did not just colonize worlds. They designed new species from scratch, creating intelligent life customized for different environments. Humanity was designed for a water-rich world with moderate gravity. The Imperial species was designed for a higher gravity world with different atmospheric composition. Dozens of other species in the assembly were also progenitor creations. Why? Chen asked. Why create so many different species? Because they were dying, Tolvam replied sadly. The progenitors had achieved incredible technological advancement, but they had lost something essential. They could no longer reproduce naturally. Their population was declining. So they created successor species, hoping that their children would inherit the galaxy and carry forward their legacy. The Empress looked at the ruins with new understanding. We are their children, all of us. The entire assembly. Yes, Tolvam confirmed. But there is more. The Covenant of Shadows was also created by the progenitors. They were designed to be caretakers, watching over the younger species and guiding them toward wisdom. But something went wrong. The Covenant became obsessed with control rather than guidance. They began manipulating their younger siblings rather than nurturing them. And the threats they warned us about? Webb asked. Tolvam's expression became grave. The progenitors did not just create life in this galaxy. They sent seed ships to other galaxies as well. Some of those experiments succeeded, some failed catastrophically, and some evolved in ways the progenitors never intended. The threats are real, Ambassador. Species from other galaxies created by the same hands that made us, but shaped by different evolutionary pressures. Some of them are coming here. Chen felt the weight of this knowledge settle on her shoulders. How long do we have? The data suggests several thousand years before the first contact. But that assumes their technology has not improved beyond progenitor predictions. If they have advanced faster than expected, it could be sooner. The group stood in silence, processing what they had learned. Finally, the Empress spoke. We have spent the past year learning to work together, learning to see each other as allies rather than enemies. We thought we were doing this to prevent another genocide, to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. But perhaps the universe was preparing us for something greater. Perhaps our conflict was necessary to forge us into something strong enough to face what is coming. Chen nodded slowly. The Covenant said we would need to face these threats ourselves. Now I understand why. We are not separate species competing for resources. We are siblings, children of the same ancient parents, inheriting their legacy and their responsibilities. So what do we do? Webb asked. Chen looked around at the assembled group. A human and Imperial, an archivist, a crystalline being, representatives of species that had been at war just a year ago, now standing together in the ruins of their common origin. We go home, Chen said firmly. We share this information with the assembly. We tell every species the truth about where we came from, and then we prepare. Not for war, but for the moment when we will meet our distant cousins from other galaxies. We prepare to show them what the progenitors' children have become. And what have we become? The Empress asked. Chen smiled. Something the progenitors never imagined. Something the Covenant tried to prevent. We have become a civilization that chooses cooperation over conquest. A civilization that values truth over comfortable lies. A civilization that faces its mistakes and learns from them. We have become exactly what the galaxy needed us to be. She turned to look at the ancient ruins one last time. The progenitors gave us life, but they could not give us wisdom. That we had to earn ourselves. And we earned it through suffering, through conflict,